Listening to that here in the studio is the Conservative MP Kwasi Kwarteng, who is Parliamentary Private Secretary, PPS, to the Chancellor, Philip Hammond. Good morning to you.
Hi.
And what is clear is that nothing is clear. There is a huge lack of clarity that is desperately required now.
I don't agree with that at all. In fact, I'm surprised that there's all this genuine, almost shock about this statement about the Customs Union. If you were to look at the Lancaster House speech last year in January, it was very clearly set out that we would leave the single market. The Prime Minister was clear about that. And also it was pretty clear that we would leave the Customs Union. The other thing I would say about the Customs Union, forgive me, is that one of the first things that Theresa May did when she became Prime Minister was set up the Department of International Trade. Now, the clue is in the title, International Trade. There was no way in which that department could do its job, which is essentially primarily to do deals with bilateral countries,
so how do you
if we were to stay in the Customs Union. So that, again, is perfectly consistent with what the government has been saying for 18 months now.
So how do you explain the various comments that have been made recently, in fact not least by Philip Hammond, talking of two economies, as he said at Davos, selectively moving them hopefully very modestly apart?
You can have countries that are modestly apart, to use that phrase, which are completely independent. And being modestly apart does not mean that you have to be in a customs union.
And why did Admiral Rudd not rule out the customs union yesterday morning?
That is not a matter for me to answer. For me,
because from from where you're sitting, everybody's been crystal clear. Everyone knows the direction of travel.
Well, from what I've seen and from what I've heard from the Prime Minister in the Lancaster House speech, from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and from the government since the last 18 months. And given the fact that we have this Department of International Trade, it seemed very unlikely and implausible that we would stay in the Customs Union. And that's been said.
So we leave the
very,
Customs
very
Union
clearly.
And we set up what? A customs arrangement?
So what we would like, I think, again, this is, we need to make this clearer, if you like, but to me it's fairly straightforward. We want to have a free trade deal with the EU. So that means that we would have free trade. It would be an agreement of mutually beneficial agreement, but it doesn't mean that we have to be in the customs union. Countries all over the world have free trade agreements.
But there will be a price to be paid. There will be a price to be paid in tariffs, in the ease with which people can do business.
Well, you will know that tariffs on goods are generally very low. So generally they're about 3%. On cars it's slightly different. But look, we're prejudging.
So you accept that? That's a hit that the UK needs to pay.
I'm not accepting that because we're prejudging the negotiation. The negotiations haven't started. What we're trying to do is to set up what our opening position is. Now, as you will know, negotiations can go anywhere, really.
And whatever border arrangements there are between England and France, will they be identical to that between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland?
Well, they won't strictly be identical because there's an English Channel between Britain and France.
Is there a proposal to have a separate arrangement because of the concerns about what would happen 20 years after the Good Friday Agreement if you impose a hard border there?
Look, I think all this talk about Northern Ireland or Ireland relapsing back to where we were in the 90s, I think is not very helpful at all. I think the circumstances are very different.
But it arises from the consequences of saying we are going to have a trade border. How are you going to have a trade border there?
I don't actually think so. I don't think it's beyond the wit of modern technology or man to have a border. It doesn't have to be a hard border, but some sort of distinction between the customs union and the non-customs union area.
And we've got a major week ahead in terms of negotiations.
Yeah.
Are we going to get more detail?
I think as the negotiations evolve, of course we're going to get more detail. I mean, I remember the process ahead of the first phase just a couple of months ago. People were saying we weren't going to get through the first phase, or they were saying that the money would be a stumbling block. They said all sorts of things would prevent us from getting on to stage two, and the Prime Minister managed to do that very well.
And all the rest of the work can be done by October, as Professor Danuta Hebner was asking.
I'm fully confident that a mutually beneficial deal between the UK and the EU will be arranged and will be finalised before the end of the year. I'm very confident of that.
Kwasi Kwarteng, thank you.